Today we're going to talk about doing an oil change on your Buell XB. Here are some of the basic things you will need. You're going to need 1 quart of Formula Plus or any other type of oil for the primary. You will need 2.5 quarts of motor oil for the oil tank. I use Valvoline VR1 20 weight 50. And you will need a micro filter for your oil filter. I'm using MicroGuard MGL 51394 is the part number. Also, you will need a wrench with a 5/8 adapter, a couple O-rings to replace the oil drain plug O-rings on the primary and the oil tank. You'll need something to catch the oil, and I like to use a rear stand when I'm doing oil changes. It seems to help me when I'm doing certain parts of the oil change, like doing the filter change. I don't have to worry about the oil dripping onto my exhaust as much when the bike is upright. So if you have a rear stand or some way to make the bike straight once you get to the oil filter removal, it would make it a lot cleaner. Alright, after you've warmed up your bike so that the oil is nice and hot and less viscous, a little more runny, a little easier to get out of the engine, go ahead and use your 5/8 socket to remove the drain plug. It's located at the bottom of the swing arm. Make sure you have something to catch the oil underneath, because once the plug comes out, you're going to have oil everywhere. Alright, so the oil plug is out. Once the oil plug is out, I go ahead and open up the oil cap, and that allows the oil to flow more freely. You also want to examine your plug to see if there's any metal shavings or any debris on there. If you have metal shavings in your oil tank, it could be indicative of possibly a crank failure coming down the road, or any other major issues. So you always want to check the oil plug to see if there's any debris on it. No debris on my plug. Looks good. You also want to examine the O-ring. The little rubber O-ring is recommended to be replaced at every oil change, but usually if my O-ring looks nice and intact, I'll reuse it. I've never had an issue with leaking, so just a matter of personal preference on that, I think. You're going to let it drain. It might take a few minutes to drain the oil. So you can walk off and do other things or get other things prepped while you wait. And we'll come back as soon as all the oil is drained out. Alright, now that the oil is mostly out, there's only little drips coming out of the bottom of the oil tank. I'm going to go ahead and put the oil drain plug back in. Generally what I like to do is swipe it real quick. Carefully start the plug. You do not want to cross thread this drain plug threading, because that's going to cause you a lot of problems
if you cross thread it. So you just start it with your hand. I like to wipe any excess oil off once I get the plug on and in partially. And then we'll tighten it up. You don't want to over tighten this plug as well. It could lead to a lot of problems. So I like to go until it stops and then give it just a little tiny bit more. Maybe a 1/16th of a turn. You'll feel it. You'll hit where it stops and just pull ever so slightly. I don't hold the end of the lever. I pretty much hold it at the end of the wrench, so I'm not torquing it too hard. So once that's closed, we can move on to removing the filter. Now I like to do this because now I can put the bike on the pit bull stand and remove the filter in the front without getting oil all over the exhaust. So get the pit bull stand. Alright, the next step is to remove your oil filter. It shouldn't be too tight. Mine I can usually loosen with my hand because when you put it on, it's hand tight. So just go ahead and slowly remove it. You're going to get some oil coming out. It's going to happen worse if you have the bike on the side stand versus on a center stand. But you just go ahead and loosen it up. You're going to get some oil coming out. But for the most part, the oil is going to avoid the exhaust, especially if you have a drummer or other smaller type exhaust, when the oil comes straight down. So see, comes straight down. And I just go ahead and put the filter off to the side there. Get a paper towel. You can wipe off any excess splatter on the exhaust if you want. As you can see, exhaust is not covered in oil. Now the oil filter I'm using, MicroGuard oil filter MGL 51394. I got it from Moto Enthusiasts. They recommended it's nice, cheap filter, very efficient. It's brand new. And what you want to do is, I like to take a little bit of oil, so I'll just take just a little bit of oil and coat the O-ring with it. A little rubber gasket on the filter. And you can put the filter on with no oil in it. It's not a big deal. So wipe down. Still dripping a little, but it's not a big deal. Put it on there and turn it. Now I just go until it's hand tight. So there it goes. Not moving, and that's all done. Now the next step will be to put oil back into the oil tank. Alright, now it's time to put the oil back into the oil tank. You should be putting about 2.5 quarts of oil. It's up to you whether or not you use synthetic or just natural motor oil. 20 weight 50 is the recommended. I use Valvoline VR1, so racing oil, 20 weight 50, is high zinc content. It was recommended to me by Jacob over at Moto Enthusiasts, who has spent some time trying various types of oils, determining what oils
help to take the most heat out of the engine and transfer it out. He noticed that the VR1 seemed to transfer a lot more heat out of the cylinders and out of the engine and bring it back into the oil tank. And so he recommended it to me. I use it, and it works great for me. But if that doesn't work for you, you can also use AMSOIL. AMSOIL is a great oil. Royal Purple's a great oil. Mobil 1's a great oil. But 20 weight 50 for synthetic. So let's go ahead and put that in. 2.5 quarts. So after you pour your 2.5 quarts in, you can check the oil level real quick. I generally like to check my oil level cold anyways. And I have my reasons for doing it. But you're going to lose a little bit into the oil filter once you start up the engine. So we'll go and do that. We'll start up the engine and get the oil moving around a little bit. Remember that when you check oil, your bike is supposed to be on the side stand. Be the most accurate way to check it. We'll go ahead and take the dipstick and wipe it off. Now, generally speaking, when I check the oil relatively cold, it's going to be near the bottom of the dipstick or at the first X. It's up to you. You can put a little bit more oil in because once the bike gets hot, oil level will rise as oil is moved from inside the crankcase back into the oil tank. So I'll just add a little bit more. Probably like another 100 milliliters or so, and then I'm done. That's just a personal preference, because if you fill 2.5 quarts, it will put you somewhere in the middle mid range. It will put you somewhere in here, and anything within the minimum and the maximum is fine. I like to be closer to the top. All right, here's the primary oil change. So what you're gonna need is your 5/8 wrench again. I'm gonna loosen, take off the drain bolt. And you're going to want your bike on a side stand when you do your primary oil change. You can avoid getting oil on that exhaust again. It also tilts the see, I got my primary oil coming out. You're gonna want to replace the little rubber washer gasket. This one tore, and you also want to examine the end of your drain plug. So you're gonna get shavings, and as long as they're fine shavings, it's gonna be your clutch material is gathered down the bottom. Nothing to be concerned about unless you get big chunks. I've gotten big chunks of metal in the past, and that turned out to be a primary chain failure. I don't know what was causing it. I think it was primary chain was over tight, and so I started getting big chunks in my primary. When I opened it up, the chain was losing chunks out of the links. So you also want to examine that, the plug for your primary for any possible issues that might be occurring. So while I'm waiting for this to finish draining, I will open the chain inspection port, and that will require a T27 bit. And this is the easiest way, in my opinion, to change the primary oil. Instructions from your manual will say open up the derby cover, or the clutch inspection cover, and I don't like doing that. I already know how much oil I'm going to put in. I put in exactly 1 quart, and that's fine for me. And I find that it's much easier just to remove 2 of these screws up here at the chain inspection cover instead of the 3 screws at the bottom and all that good stuff. So I just do it this way. So you'll remove the screws and the cover. There is a gasket as well. So that comes off. Examine that, make sure it's okay. I like to dust it off also. Alright, so we're going to wait for that oil to drain. Get my rubber gasket replacement here. And it's a little replacement gasket. Just go ahead and put it on top. Drain plug. It's on. All right, once oil is pretty much done dripping, you got just slow drops. Once again, you can do the same thing as you did with your oil tank. Just wipe it real quick, and then you want to get the threading started, making sure not to cross thread, because if you cross thread, once again, it's a pain in the butt, because you're gonna have to retap or do something to fix it. It's gonna be a pain in the butt. So just be very careful when you put your drain bolt back in. Right. I go hand tight as far as I can. And, tighten it with the 5/8. And you don't want to over tighten with this drain bolt as well. So you do the same thing. I like to go until it's snug and then just a little bit more. And that's it. Time to put the oil in. Now, it's up to you what kind of oil you put in. It also depends what kind of clutch. The stock clutch, they do recommend the Formula Plus from Harley Davidson. Now that's partly because it's their brand. When they designed the motorcycle, they were using that. It's a good oil. It's recommended. Put your little siphon right in there, and put your quart of oil in. And a full quart is going to be just fine. Some people like to use the method that the manual says to use, which is you open up the clutch inspection cover and you make sure that the oil is touching the bottom of the basket. And so if you've done several of these oil changes, you will notice that a quart will put you there, and so you won't even have to open that up and put your bike on a rear stand to straighten it up and inspect anymore. Alright, the final step is to put your chain inspection cover back on. I recommend putting a little blue Loctite on the screws so they don't come off. Blue Loctite, I use the blue Loctite stick. It is an awesome thing. Don't have to worry about the liquid. It stays on the threads while you're working with it. So just put a little bit on both. started. Put the second one on. And with all screws on the motorcycle, you don't want to over tighten anything. And just snug it down, and then just a little bit of a turn, maybe like an eighth of a turn. And when I do my tightening, I don't hold the end of the lever. I don't want to damage the threads. So just there we go, nice and snug, and your oil change is done. I changed my primary oil and my oil tank engine oil at the same time, and I do it at about 5,000 miles. It's just easy to remember that way. So that's that. Thanks for watching.